One, two, is this on?
One name towers above all, Hulk Hogan. With his 24-inch pythons and larger-than-life charisma, Hogan became the face of an entire industry. But behind the red and yellow spectacle lies a legacy as complicated as it is iconic. This is the story of how Terry Bollea rose to immortal fame, created controversy, and left behind a wrestling empire grappling with how to remember its biggest star. This is Hulk Hogan, the complicated legacy of wrestling's biggest icon. Hulk Hogan's journey to superstardom began in the early 1980s, when he exploded onto the scene in Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation. With his immense size, Hogan quickly reigned supreme as the WWF's main attraction. In January 1984, he defeated the Iron Sheik for the WWF Championship in Madison Square Garden, igniting what would become known as HULKAMANIA, as Hogan soon went from a wrestling star to cultural phenomenon. To become Hulk Hogan, Bollea borrowed from one of his idols, superstar Billy Graham, the premier wrestling star of the 70s. With his all-American persona, Hogan rallied millions of fans, or Hulkamaniacs, behind his simple creed: train, say your prayers, and eat your vitamins. Fans treated him like a real-life superhero. Hulk was Americana, like the song said, a real American. And as one of his later entrance themes put it, he's got the red, white, and blue running through his veins. He was born and raised in the US of A. He's American-made. Everywhere the WWF went in the 80s, arenas overflowed, screaming his name. Merchandise bearing his likeness flew off shelves. From action figures to bandanas, Hulk Hogan was more than just a wrestler. He was a role model and a living, breathing cartoon hero. Hogan's appeal transcended wrestling. By the mid-80s, his likeness touched every corner of pop culture. Previously, he had already played Thunderlips in Rocky III opposite Sylvester Stallone. Then he would later guest star on TV shows like The A-Team. Just like his friend Mr. T, Hogan was an 80s pop icon in his own right. Hulk Hogan carried wrestling into the mainstream spotlight. The star power of Hulk Hogan turned McMahon's empire into a global marketing juggernaut. By the end of the 1980s, professional wrestling was on the map in a way that it had never been, largely thanks to the charisma and crossover appeal of its biggest icon. Hogan was, as WWF's own statement remembered, one of pop culture's most recognizable figures, and the man who helped the company achieve global recognition in the 1980s. In the 80s and early 90s, Hulk Hogan was undeniably the hero of professional wrestling. He was the ultimate good guy, always defeating the villain, from Bundy to Bossman to Slaughter, all iconic foes. Or how about the legendary run-ins with Macho Man Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior? But if we circle back to when Hogan's fame grew, so did whispers of what was happening behind the curtain. In a business built on scripted outcomes, real power plays were happening out of the spotlight, and Hogan was often at the center of them. Hogan's influence backstage was infamous. Fellow wrestlers have long accused the Hulkster of using his clout to protect his top dog status, sometimes at the expense of others' careers. One infamous instance came at WrestleMania 9 in 1993. Bret the Hitman Hart, one of the company's new stars, was slated to close the show as WWF champion, but in a shocking twist decided the night before, Hogan swooped in after Bret's match and pinned Yokozuna to steal back the WWF title to hot dog and grandstand over the screwed Bret. Years later, the Hitman didn't mince words when reflecting on Mania 9. He felt Hulk had sabotaged his career by undercutting him on the grandest stage.
Oh my gosh. I'm standing there with, I feel like I got a big knife in my back. Never felt more betrayed by Vince McMahon than I did that day.
The bitterness lingered for decades. As Bret saw it, Hogan refused to pass the torch, preferring to keep the spotlight on himself. Bret wasn't alone in that sentiment. In the 90s, terms like creative control became synonymous with Hulk Hogan. He had a say in how his matches ended, and more often than not, it was with his hand raised. Wrestlers who might challenge his spot were, according to locker room lore, kept at bay. In Bret's view, Hulk Hogan cared more about preserving his mythos than helping new stars shine. It was a similar story again for Bret in the months going into the 93 SummerSlam. At the event, the Hitman was meant to defeat Hulk for the belt. After the Hulkster had promised Bret he would return the favor from WrestleMania 9, Hogan went back on his promise and refused to work with Hart altogether. Hulk departed from WWF shortly after, so he could focus on acting full-time. Bret believes putting the title back on Hogan was a tactic from Chairman Vince McMahon to try and prevent the Hulkster from joining WCW.
Hogan was putting a lot of pressure on Vince to take the belt and take it off me and put it on him. Otherwise, he was going to go to WCW.
Hulk, however, claims it was all his idea to defeat Yokozuna at Mania, and the plan was always to drop the belt back to Yoko and not Bret.
Bret Hart, who thought I basically sabotaged his career because Bret thought he should have been the greatest wrestler that ever lived, and he said it was my fault. I won the belt from Yokozuna, and the deal was for me to drop it back to Yokozuna. And then Bret got in my face. He goes, "Hey, you're supposed to drop the belt to me." I said, "No, I'm not." He goes, "Well, yeah, you are, so let's go let's talk to Vince then. Went in and sat down and talked to Vince, and Vince looked at Brett and said, Brett, that's what you thought you heard. So ever since then, he hated my guts and wanted to kill me.
But Hogan's reputation for backstage gamesmanship didn't start with Bret Hart. Back in 1991, The Undertaker defeated Hogan at Survivor Series to win his first WWF Championship, delivering a tombstone piledriver onto a steel chair, but Hogan later claimed it injured his neck. However, replays showed Hogan's head never touched the chair. Undertaker, then only 26, was devastated, thinking he'd hurt the company's top star, but after watching the footage and confronting Hogan, he was stunned by Hogan's excuse that the hold was too tight and left him nowhere to move. Undertaker later said, at that point, I knew what he was about, and that's all I needed.
When I got that answer, I knew all I needed to know about him. And that's the way always, then, my radar was always up anytime that I had to, interact with him.
Just days later, Hogan regained the title at This Tuesday in Texas, and Undertaker couldn't help but feel used, that the injury was exaggerated to justify a rematch and preserve Hogan's status. It was a setup from the get-go, he recalled years later.
I knew there was going to be another pay-per-view, but I didn't know that I was going to drop the belt back and what was going on. I mean, that came up out of nowhere.
Taker quietly carried that lesson about Hogan's politics for the rest of his career. Perhaps the most telling story of Hogan's backstage influence comes from 1986, when wrestler turned actor Jesse the Body Ventura attempted something unthinkable at the time, organizing a wrestlers' union. Ventura, frustrated by wrestlers' lack of benefits and job security, held a covert meeting to discuss unionizing just before WrestleMania 2. But when word got out to Vince McMahon, the union talk was quashed overnight. After the fact, Ventura discovered who ratted out the plan: Hulk Hogan. Ventura has never hidden his contempt for Hogan's betrayal. He explained that in old territory days, the worst label a wrestler could earn was office stooge, a mole who pretended to be one of the boys, but secretly fed information to the promoter.
He's the one that ratted me to Vince when I tried to unionize. With no hesitation, Vince went, Hulk Hogan told me. And I didn't show any emotion, but I almost tipped over in the chair, because he was my friend.
In Ventura's eyes, Hogan's allegiance was only to his own fortune.
When we went to court, I saw in WrestleMania 3, Hogan got paid more than all of us combined. Now, why would he want a union when he's getting taken care of?
These backstage controversies painted a starkly different picture of a man who told us to eat your vitamins. Hulk Hogan, the icon, gave everything to the fans in the ring, but Hulk Hogan, the businessman, made sure he stayed on top, whatever the cost. It's a dual image that many who worked with him have had to reconcile: the beloved hero of their childhood and the cagey operator they knew at work. And as Hogan's career moved forward, that duality would only become more pronounced. By the early 1990s, the bloom of HULKAMANIA in WWF had begun to fade. The audience's tastes were changing, and Hogan's real American hero shtick was starting to feel dated.
We love Hulk Hogan or Hulkamania live forever. I see a sign up that said, hey, did you take your shot today?
In 1994, sensing an opportunity of financial riches and a lighter schedule, Hogan jumped ship to World Championship Wrestling.
I missed wrestling so much that finally I caved and basically went to work for Ted Turner.
This was also coming off the heels of the WWF steroid trial, where Hulk testified against Vince McMahon, which angered the chairman.
Hogan is granted immunity for anything he would reveal on the stand about how he got his steroids from Dr. Zahorian while working for McMahon.
Though Hogan contends that his testimony was the reason the boss wasn't found guilty.
Vince didn't go to jail for 17 years because of me.
Hulk had simmed down significantly during this period, given all the controversy, since the Hulkster was considered the proverbial poster boy for steroids in wrestling at the time. Hogan had also infamously lied about using steroids on the Arsenio Hall show in '91, after Vince wanted him to come clean and tell the truth.
I've trained 20 years, 2 hours a day to look like I do. But the things that I am not is I'm not a steroid abuser, and I do not use steroids.
I myself personally have injected Hulk Hogan with anabolic steroids.
I injected Hogan with steroids many times.
Oh, he told me he'd been taking steroids for 1 full year at the time I met him. I believe his surgeries, all of his operations are linked to the steroid use.
The common laugh used to be when he used to tell the kids to say their prayers and take their vitamins. In the dressing room, we'd always laugh and say, orals or injectables?
The best want to get younger.
Vince McMahon is probably thinking, do I want a diminished, thinner Hulk Hogan as my centerpiece, advertising to my audience how important steroids were to his look? So Vince McMahon had to shift his focus to smaller wrestlers who were more athletic.
Hogan's arrival in WCW was a seismic event. The biggest name in the industry had defected to McMahon's rival. The Hulkster netted a $2 million a year contract with a creative control clause that meant Hulk never had to do anything with his character he didn't want to. And he wasn't done transforming. Hulk Hogan was about to pull off the most famous heel turn in wrestling history. Initially, WCW presented Hogan exactly as fans knew him, in the red and in yellow fighting foes like Ric Flair. But by 1996, Hogan's act was growing stale again. Then came Bash at the Beach in 1996. Hulk Hogan betrayed the fans and aligned himself with the Outsiders, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, to form the villainous faction known as the New World Order, the NWO. The impact was immediate and extraordinary. The NWO took the wrestling world by storm, and Hogan, now calling himself Hollywood Hogan dressed in black and white, was once again at the center of a mainstream wrestling boom. Fans who had cheered him for years now poured their hatred onto him, and Hogan reveled in it, reinventing himself as the ultimate bad guy. This gamble helped change WCW's fortunes. With Hogan leading the way, the promotion surged in popularity, overtaking the WWF in TV ratings for 83 consecutive weeks. It was Hogan's star power, coupled with a cutting-edge storyline, that helped WCW rise to the top of the wrestling world. For Hogan, the WCW run added an important chapter to his legacy. He proved that he could be the villain just as convincingly as he had been the hero. As Hollywood Hogan, he collided with legends like Sting, Lex Luger, and Goldberg, while also sharing the squared circle with huge names outside the ring like Dennis Rodman, Karl Malone, and Jay Leno. The NWO's rebellious cool factor vibe, with Hogan at the helm, permeated pop culture in the late 90s, appearing on magazine covers and talk shows. Once again, Hogan's presence was turning wrestling into water cooler conversation. But the WCW chapter was not without its controversies either. Hogan's creative control clause and backstage politicking in WCW became notorious. Still, in terms of legacy, his WCW run cemented Hollywood as a two-act superstar, the ultimate babyface of the 80s and the ultimate heel of the 90s. Few wrestlers have ever reshaped their personas so drastically and succeeded so wildly. Once again, Hogan was at the center of another mainstream outbreak of wrestling during the NWO era, and it solidified him as a transcendent figure in the industry for a second time. After WCW folded in 2001, Hulk Hogan was back in WWE a year later. WrestleMania 18 in Toronto featured an icon vs icon showdown, Hollywood Hogan vs The Rock. It was a dream match bridging generations. Hogan entered as the villainous NWO leader, but left as the hero. The bell rang and suddenly the tide turned. The Toronto crowd exploded with adoration for Hogan, cheering his every move and booing The Rock. The planned roles didn't matter anymore. The fans had spoken. They wanted the Hulkster back. Hulkamania was running wild once again, decades after its birth. The Rock ultimately won the match as Hulk passed the torch. Then after the pinfall, in a show of ultimate sportsmanship, The Rock beckoned Hogan to pose for the crowd in a cathartic release.
And they are! This crowd's showing respect to Hogan!
It was a moment of pure wrestling magic, the kind that gives you goosebumps. Hogan, visibly moved, acknowledged an audience that had never forgotten him. Following that WrestleMania, WWF swiftly pivoted.
Look at the response from these people, JR! This is amazing!
Hulk Hogan shed the villain persona and returned to his beloved red and yellow attire. Just 1 month later, Hogan challenged for the undisputed WWE Championship. In a fairy tale moment at Backlash, he defeated Triple H to win the title once more at age 48 as the crowd went wild.
HULKAMANIA is real! It is reality! Can you believe it?
Week after week in arena after arena, fans of all ages relived the magic, chanting at the top of their lungs. The nostalgia was real, and Hogan was clearly touched by the outpouring, often unable to speak due to the deafening reactions. This triumphant return underscored an important truth. The public still loved Hulk Hogan. A 20 years in the making personal feud with Vince McMahon later followed, which hit on the real-life drama between Hulk and Vince. McMahon had made Hogan a star in WWF, only for Hulk to leave for WCW. It was an obvious story to tell, and its execution made for some great TV. Hulk Hogan's career in the ring wound down in the 2000s, but he never truly left the public eye. He dabbed in reality TV with Hogan Knows Best, exposing his family life to fans, but it wasn't a TV show that would make Hogan front page news again. It was a scandal that shook his legacy to its core. Over the years, fans became increasingly aware of incidents that cast a shadow over the man behind the mustache. During his son Nick's time in jail for a 2007 car crash that left his friend John Graziano with permanent brain damage, Hogan was caught on tape making racially charged comments in a recorded jailhouse call. His personal life also drew its share of public scrutiny. Hogan divorced his longtime wife Linda in 2009 after a tumultuous, messy separation that played out in tabloids.
I don't know how he could do this to his family, to his peers, to the world, and and still keep his chin up and act like he's done no wrong.
In October 2012, the gossip website Gawker made a shocking post. Clips from a secretly filmed Hogan sex tape. The footage showing Hogan in an intimate encounter and recorded without his knowledge unleashed a media firestorm. Embarrassed and furious, Hogan launched a legal war against Gawker for invasion of privacy. The lawsuit, Belair vs. Gawker, became a high-profile battle over celebrity privacy and freedom of the press. In 2016, Hogan scored a victory in court. A jury in Florida awarded him $140 million in damages. Gawker was financially crushed, bankrupted, and forced to shut down its website. It was a triumphant moment for Hogan in one sense. He had vanquished an enemy outside the ring, in the courts. But as that courtroom drama played out, a far more damaging revelation emerged. In 2015, amid the legal battle, transcripts of the sex tape's audio were leaked to the public. What they revealed was appalling. Hulk Hogan, in a private conversation, repeatedly used the N-word and made racist remarks about his daughter's boyfriend. The man who urged a generation to be a real American was caught on tape spewing vile, bigoted language. The fallout was swift and severe. WWE immediately cut ties with Hogan upon the leak, scrubbing its website of all references to him overnight. The once beloved Hulk Hogan was now radioactive. He was publicly disgraced, and his reputation seemingly destroyed in the eyes of many fans. Hogan quickly issued an apology, but even that drew criticism. In a tearful Good Morning America interview, he insisted,
"I'm not a racist. I never should have said what I said. It was wrong."
While some accepted his contrition, others pointed out that Hogan often seemed more sorry about being recorded than about the hurtfulness of his words.
And it's exactly what that was. It was a glitch. It was a huge mistake. The worst thing I've ever said.
Backstage, WWE brought Hogan in to apologize to the locker room in person in 2018, an effort to pave the way for his return, but the reactions were mixed at best. Black wrestlers were not quick to forgive.
Guys that were like, man, the hell with him. And I had guys that was like, you know what, man, if you're willing to make a change and try to help out and go and speak up and be a part of the answer rather than a part of the problem, then it's all good.
The New Day faction released a powerful statement that made their stance clear. How do we feel? Indifferent. They wrote acknowledging Hogan's place in history, but making it known they would not celebrate him. It is impossible to even begin to mention the history of the business without mentioning his name and accolades, but on a personal level, when someone makes racist and hateful comments, we find it simply difficult to forget. We do not associate with the people who conveyed this hurtful mindset. This instance will be no different. Perhaps if we see him make a genuine effort to change, then maybe our opinion will change. Time will tell. Their message, respect the career but distrust the man, spoke volumes. Titus O'Neil likewise voiced discomfort. He pointed out that Hogan's locker room apology fell flat. Titus noted that Hogan apologized for not realizing he was recorded, which to Titus is not remorse for the hateful and violent utterances he made. He said many colleagues felt Hogan's speech lacked true contrition, remorse, and a desire to change. In other words, Hogan's words did little to heal the wound. Titus, like the New Day, didn't call for Hogan's banishment. In fact, he acknowledged Hogan as a Hall of Famer and hero and icon to countless people, but he expected Hogan to truly own up to the harm done and work to fix it. As of then, in Titus' view, Hogan had not done enough. Even Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, one of Hogan's most famous opponents and a global star in his own right, weighed in on the scandal. The Rock, whose own family is part black and Samoan, said he was disappointed at Hogan's comments. "I had not known the man to be racist," The Rock said, noting that his personal experiences with Hogan had been positive. Yet he did not excuse Hogan. He said what he said and he's paying the price, Johnson remarked matter-of-factly. The price was evident. For 3 years, Hulk Hogan was persona non grata in WWE. It was as if his career had been erased. Many thought it was the end, that the greatest icon wrestling ever produced would live out his days estranged from the industry he helped build. The fall from grace was astonishing in scale, from worshipped hero to disgraced outcast. But in 2018, WWE cautiously opened the door for Hogan's redemption, bringing him back for select appearances. The company cited Hogan's numerous public apologies and efforts to educate youth as reasons for giving him a second chance. Hogan himself frequently expressed hopes that fans would forgive him in time. Yet, as Hogan re-entered the wrestling sphere, it was clear that things would never be the same. The adoration that once greeted him was now mixed with apathy or even opposition from portions of the audience and locker room. Hulk Hogan's legacy, once almost universally celebrated, had become deeply divided, and that divide would be on full display the next time he tried to step into the spotlight. In 2021 at WrestleMania 37, WWE tried to ease Hogan back into the spotlight by naming him co-host of the event with Titus O'Neil. But even in his hometown of Tampa, Hogan was audibly booed throughout both nights of the show. The cheers for Titus only made the contrast starker.
Welcome to WrestleMania Sunday!
For many fans, the wounds from Hogan's past still hadn't healed, and no pairing, no matter how beloved, could change that. Later, his support for Donald Trump sparked fresh backlash. Hogan aligned himself with an ideology that further polarized the public's opinion of Hulk, and ultimately, his legacy. Wrestling fans would also make note of the many times Hogan has lied or stretched the truth about certain things he's done to picture him in a better light. The lies related to things he'd done in his professional career and said during public appearances or written in books and articles. And perhaps it relates back to how, in his own words, anytime Terry Bollea stepped outside his house, he became Hulk Hogan, meaning in public, he was always in character in some form, hence the tall tales, or indeed misremembering, that painted Hulk in such a distinguished light compared to the actual truth of the matter. In January 2025, WWE kicked off a bold new era, the historic premiere of Monday Night Raw on Netflix, streaming live for the first time. To celebrate, the company leaned on nostalgia, including an appearance from Hogan. Hogan's music hit and the arena erupted, not in cheers, but in boos.
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Hogan walked out with his old manager, Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart, playing to the crowd and even promoting his new craft brew, Hogan's Real American Beer. But the Los Angeles audience wasn't having it. He tried to win them over, but the jeers only intensified.
You, the fans, have been my greatest tag team partner because you guys have stuck with me through thick and thin, dudes.
Backstage, wrestlers and legends watched this unfold in real time. Some, like The Undertaker, even found a bit of poetic justice in it.
Hogan returned?
Here we go. Here we go. We grew up seeing Hogan as this great thing,
bigger
and then
life Americana kind of deal, and then obviously, he gets caught on tape, saying some derogatory, racist things, and in this day and age where all of that is such a hot button deal. Like, I don't know what you expect. Like, I think people are gonna, they're gonna react, and they're not gonna react in a positive way.
It was a striking statement, a fellow legend essentially saying Hogan had reaped what he sowed. The negative reception at Raw's Netflix debut became the talking point of the night, overshadowing even the matches. Media outlets picked up the story of Hulk Hogan being booed out of the building, and the incident reignited debate about his standing with fans. Though it was clear, a broad portion of the fandom still couldn't look past Hogan's transgressions. The Netflix premiere debacle stands as Hogan's final WWE moment, not a fond farewell, but rather an awkward, painful reminder that the world had changed. The red and yellow hero, who once could do no wrong in the eyes of fans, had become someone many refused to cheer. Aligning with Trump won't have helped Hulk's cause either, given this show was in California. On July 24, 2025, news broke that shocked the world of sports entertainment. Hulk Hogan had died at the age of 71 due to cardiac arrest. Within minutes, social media lit up with reactions, and a familiar schism appeared. On one side, an outpouring of tributes for a childhood hero and a pillar of wrestling history. On the other, a chorus of voices reminding everyone of the complicated legacy he left behind. The tributes were indeed numerous and heartfelt. It was clear that to many who knew or were inspired by him, Hogan was a legend of legends. The wrestling world mourned the loss of the icon, who for better or worse had made their industry what it is. But amid the praise there was backlash, some subtle, some overt. Many fans and commentators on social platforms pointed out that Hogan's tributes were omitting the uncomfortable parts of his story, but some felt that it was a time to focus on the positive, the childhood memories, the Hulkster who inspired people. Others argued that it's impossible to talk about Hogan now without acknowledging the hurt he caused and the trust he betrayed. And yet, for all the criticism, the respect for Hogan's impact was still profound. So now we are left with a complicated picture. Hulk Hogan is gone, but the conversation about him has perhaps never been louder. On one hand, you have legions of fans and colleagues saying thank you for the memories, the inspiration, the larger-than-life charisma that made them fall in love with wrestling. On the other hand, you have those who cannot and should not forget the pain of his hateful words, or the colleagues whose careers he might have stiffed along the way. In death, as in life, Hogan remains a figure of debate. One thing is certain, Hulk Hogan's legacy will not be a simple one-liner. It's as complex as the man behind the character. As fans, we are left to reconcile the two faces of Hogan, the embodiment of American-made superheroism and the flawed human who fell from grace. Some have already made up their minds one way or the other. Many more will continue to wrestle with it in the years to come. In the end, the tale of Hulk Hogan is a cautionary epic. The meteoric rise, the cultural domination, the hero worship, and then the painful fall and search for redemption. It forces us to ask difficult questions about our heroes. Can we separate the art from the artist? How do we honor accomplishments while acknowledging faults? And what do we value more in our icons? Their contributions to our lives, lives, or their conduct outside the limelight? How will Hulk Hogan ultimately be remembered? The larger-than-life icon who embodied the hopes and dreams of a generation, or as a tragic cautionary tale, a reminder that even our biggest icons have human flaws that can shadow their legacy? The answer may not be easy, and it may not be unanimous. Perhaps the legacy of Hulk Hogan will forever lie somewhere in between glory and infamy, a complicated legacy. But what isn't complicated is how much Hulk did for his industry. Hogan stands side by side with Muhammad Ali, Babe Ruth, and Michael Jordan, and though it's time to say goodbye to the biggest icon in wrestling, his spirit is still running wild. Hulk Hogan is immortal, and HULKAMANIA will live forever.